Edwin Grayson, an 82-year-old retired archaeologist with mere weeks to live, embarks on a final journey to Machu Picchu, a destination he'd dreamed of visiting his entire life. Guided by whispers of an ancient Incan relic said to hold unimaginable truths, Edwin battles illness and time. As he ascends the sacred site, he uncovers a hidden chamber untouched for centuries. There, a relic pulsating with energy awaits him, promising answers not just about the world, but the essence of life itself. The weight of 72 years chasing dreams and uncovering lost civilizations bore heavily on Edwin Grayson as he stared out the window of his study. The once strong and adventurous man had become a frail shadow of himself, his body ravaged by time and terminal illness. The doctor's grim words echoed in his ears. Weeks, maybe a month at best. Edwin felt no fear. Instead, he felt urgency. One dream had yet to be fulfilled, standing in the ancient city of Machu Picchu. Edwin's fascination with Machu Picchu began as a young boy, poring over books on ancient civilizations. His career as an archaeologist had taken him to far corners of the world, uncovering secrets that would fill museums and textbooks. But Machu Picchu, the jewel of Incan architecture, remained elusive. Life had always intervened: projects, family, and eventually his failing health. As he prepared for his final journey, his modest home buzzed with quiet activity. His daughter, Helen, fussed over travel arrangements with skepticism. "Dad, are you sure this is a good idea? You're not in any shape to travel, let alone hike up a mountain." Her voice cracked, betraying her fear of losing him. Edwin smiled, a glint of mischief in his tired eyes. "Helen, I've spent my life chasing the past. Let me have this adventure." His granddaughter, Sophie, hugged him tightly. "Bring me back something cool, Grandpa, like a treasure or a magic rock." Her innocence warmed his heart in a way no medicine could. That night, Edwin sat alone in his study and opened a weathered journal, his log of sites visited, discoveries made, and dreams unfulfilled. The entry for Machu Picchu was blank except for one line: the relic of truths, myth or destiny. Beneath it, he had sketched a crude drawing of a golden orb surrounded by symbols from an old Incan manuscript. The relic was said to reveal ultimate truths, though its existence was unproven. Edwin closed the journal, his resolve firm. He had no illusions about his physical state. This trip was as much about closure as it was about chasing myths. He would find answers or pass on knowing he had dared to try. The morning of his departure was bittersweet. Helen and Sophie saw him off at the airport, their hugs lingering longer than usual. Helen handed him a small envelope. "Open this when you get there," she said, her eyes glistening with tears. Sophie waved excitedly. "Don't forget the magic rock." As the plane ascended, Edwin felt exhilaration and trepidation. This would be his most challenging journey, but he was ready. For the first time in years, he felt alive, not in body, but in spirit. Little did he know, this journey would lead him not only to Machu Picchu, but to a discovery that would change everything he thought he knew about life, death, and the mysteries of existence. Edwin Grayson arrived at Jorge Chavez International Airport in Lima, greeted by the hum of travelers and the aroma of roasted coffee. The journey to Peru had been exhausting, but anticipation outweighed fatigue. For a man nearing the end of his days, the thrill of what lay ahead was almost surreal. Navigating through customs, Edwin's hands trembled slightly, not from illness, but adrenaline. His plan was clear: a night in Lima, then Cusco to acclimate before reaching Machu Picchu. Yet destiny had other ideas. Outside the airport, Edwin noticed a man standing apart. Dressed in a leather jacket with an old satchel, he seemed to study Edwin intently. When their eyes met, the man smiled and approached. "Senor Grayson?" he asked, his voice calm and assured. "Yes," Edwin replied cautiously. "And you are?" "I'm Amaru," the man said, extending a hand. I've come to guide you." Edwin frowned. "Guide me? I didn't hire a guide." Amaru chuckled softly. "No, but sometimes guides find those who need them." Despite skepticism, Edwin felt a strange pull toward the man. Something about Amaru felt familiar, though he couldn't place why. Hesitant but intrigued, Edwin followed him to a small, unmarked car waiting nearby. During the drive, Amaru spoke of Incan history with a passion that mirrored Edwin's own. His knowledge was staggering, yet cryptic, as if he held secrets he wasn't ready to share. "Many come to Machu Picchu for its beauty," Amaru said, glancing at Edwin in the rearview mirror. "But you seek something deeper, don't you?" Edwin's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Amaru smiled but said nothing, his silence more revealing than words. Later that night, Edwin lay in his hotel bed, his mind spinning. Who was this man? How did he know about Edwin's purpose? His exhaustion soon gave way to sleep, and with it, vivid dreams. In his dream, Edwin stood atop a mountain, the air thin and cold. Before him lay a golden orb, identical to the one in his journal. It pulsed with light, illuminating ancient symbols. As he reached out to touch it, the orb shattered, revealing truths too profound to comprehend. He awoke with a start, drenched in sweat, the dream lingering like a shadow. His eyes fell on the envelope Helen had given him. He had forgotten it amidst the excitement. Opening it, he found an old photograph of himself and Helen at an excavation site, her handwriting on the back. "For all the adventures we shared, and the ones you'll have without me. I love you, Dad." Tears welled as he held it close, a bittersweet reminder of why this journey mattered. The next morning, Edwin met Amaru in the lobby, the photograph's weight fresh in his heart. They set off for Cusco, the gateway to the sacred valley. As they drove, Edwin couldn't shake the feeling that his dream and Amaru's cryptic words were intertwined, as though unseen forces were guiding him toward something far greater than he imagined. Little did he know, this journey would push him to confront truths about himself, humanity, and the universe itself. The air in Cusco was sharp and thin, biting at Edwin's lungs as he stepped off the plane. At 11,000 feet above sea level, the city greeted him with a mix of Spanish colonial architecture and Incan ruins. Cobblestone streets wound up steep hills, and the sounds of life, vendors, laughter, and bells filled the air. Edwin's chest tightened, though he couldn't tell if it was the altitude or the city's sheer beauty. Amaru led Edwin to a modest inn on the city's outskirts. "Rest," he instructed. "The altitude can be unkind." From his room, Edwin gazed at the mountains. Somewhere out there lay Machu Picchu, hidden in the clouds. He wanted to open his journal, to review his notes and sketches, but exhaustion overtook him, and he fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The next morning, Edwin awoke to a knock at his door. Amaru handed him a pouch of coca leaves. "Chew them," he said. "They will ease the altitude's effects." Their day was spent exploring Cusco. Amaru brought Edwin to Coricancha, the Temple of the Sun, once covered in gold and now reduced to stone beneath a Spanish convent. Edwin ran his hand along the ancient stones and felt a peculiar energy, as though the past were alive. "You feel it," Amaru said softly. "The stones remember." "Remember what?" Edwin asked. Amaru's faint smile hinted at secrets. "Everything. The Incas believed the earth was alive. Perhaps they were right." That night, Edwin sat in the inn's courtyard, reflecting on Amaru's words. Could the places he had studied hold more than history? Could they hold truth? The following morning, they boarded a train to Aguas Calientes. The journey through the sacred valley was mesmerizing. Towering Andes, the Urubamba River rushing below. Edwin's heart raced as the train wound deeper into the mountains. In Aguas Calientes, the air was humid, thick with the scent of flowers. Amaru led Edwin to a small inn but offered no instructions to rest. "Tomorrow," he said, "we ascend." That evening, Edwin sat on the inn's balcony, his journal open. The page for Machu Picchu remained blank, save for his sketch of the golden orb. He traced its lines with trembling fingers. Was it myth or destiny? He thought of the dream he'd had in Lima, the orb shattering into fragments of truth. Was it a vision, or his mind reaching for meaning? The first light of dawn crept over the mountains as Edwin finally closed the journal. Tomorrow, he would step into the city he had dreamed of for decades. What awaited him, he couldn't know, but for the first time in years, he felt not just alive, but awakened. As he drifted into sleep, the mountains seemed to whisper through the wind, "You are close." Machu Picchu would not only fulfill Edwin's lifelong dream, but reveal secrets that would challenge everything he believed. The ascent to Machu Picchu began in the early hours, the sun barely cresting the peaks of the Andes. The dense jungle around the site was alive with bird calls and rustling leaves. Edwin's heart raced, not from exertion but anticipation. Each step brought him closer to the dream he had pursued for decades. Amaru moved confidently ahead, his steps as if guided by the mountain itself. Edwin followed, his cane steadying him on uneven paths. Though his body protested, his spirit soared. When they reached the first overlook, Edwin's breath caught. There it was, Machu Picchu, the city in the clouds. Its terraces and stone structures shimmered in the morning light, a testament to ancient ingenuity. Tears filled Edwin's eyes, a blend of awe and gratitude. "This is what you came for," Amaru said, his gaze steady on the ruins. "But it is not all you will find." "What do you mean?" Edwin asked. Amaru didn't respond. He gestured toward the path ahead. "Come, there is a story you must hear." Descending into Machu Picchu, Amaru spoke of Pachacuti, the Incan emperor who built the city. It was not just a royal estate, he said. It was a spiritual center, a bridge between the physical and the divine. Edwin's mind raced. He had read theories about the city's purpose, but Amaru's words hinted at something deeper. "There is a legend," Amaru continued, his voice hushed as they neared the Temple of the Sun. "It is said Pachacuti hid a sacred relic here, a gift from the gods. It reveals ultimate truths, but only to the worthy." The relic of truths. Edwin's pulse quickened. He had chased its myth for years, following fragments of stories and symbols. Could it truly lie here? Inside the temple, the air was cool, the stone walls precisely aligned with celestial events. Edwin ran his hand along the stones, sensing an energy, as though the place were alive. Amaru stood at the center of the room, his face solemn. "You are close, but the relic does not reveal itself easily. It demands more than desire. It requires sacrifice." "What kind of sacrifice?" Edwin whispered. Amaru didn't answer. He reached into his satchel and placed a small carved stone in Edwin's hand. "This will guide you," he said. "But the path ahead is yours alone." The stone was etched with symbols Edwin recognized from his research. It felt warm, pulsing faintly, as if alive. Before Edwin could ask more, Amaru was gone, his silhouette disappearing into the light. Left alone, Edwin felt exhilaration and dread. The relic was real. He could feel it. But at what cost? As the day wore on, Edwin followed the stone's faint hum, leading him to hidden corners and passages. By sundown, he knew he was on the brink of something extraordinary. That night, beneath a sky full of stars, Edwin sat with the carved stone in his palm. The mountains seemed to whisper louder now, urging him forward. He closed his eyes and let their voices wash over him. Tomorrow, he would follow the stone's guidance. Tomorrow, he would face the truth. The morning mist clung to the mountains as Edwin stepped onto the stone paths of Machu Picchu. The carved stone Amaru had given him pulsed faintly in his palm, guiding him toward a part of the ruins few ventured into. The usual chatter of tourists seemed distant, muffled by the mist. Edwin realized he was alone. Instead of unease, a calm determination filled him. The stone's hum grew stronger as he neared the terraces overlooking the sacred valley. Hidden among overgrown vines, he spotted a narrow passage descending into the earth. It was obscured, as if nature itself sought to conceal it. Edwin hesitated, the weight of the stone grounding him. This had to be the hidden path. With a steadying breath, Edwin stepped inside. The air grew cool, damp, and faintly earthy. Ancient carvings lined the walls, their intricate patterns glowing softly as the stone in his hand responded. Some symbols were familiar, constellations and Incan glyphs, while others eluded understanding. They told a story Edwin couldn't yet decipher. Deeper within, the passage opened into a cavernous chamber. At its center stood a stone altar surrounded by towering pillars etched with more carvings. Edwin placed the glowing stone onto the altar, and the chamber seemed to come alive. The pillars lit up, casting the room in shifting patterns of light and shadow. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed, and the floor trembled beneath Edwin. A voice filled the chamber, not heard, but felt deep within his being. "Why have you come?" "I seek the truth," Edwin replied, his voice steady despite the awe overtaking him. "The relic of truths." "Truth is not given, it is earned," the voice resonated. "To proceed, you must confront the weight of your existence." The chamber's light intensified, and in an instant, Edwin found himself at a familiar excavation site, his first major dig. Shadows shifted into figures, his younger self, colleagues, and Helen. Memories surged forward. This was where he had uncovered the artifact that launched his career, but at the cost of betraying a close friend. Guilt he had buried for years now surfaced. "I made mistakes," Edwin admitted, his voice trembling. "I hurt people, but I believed I was doing the right thing." The figures remained silent, their judgment palpable. The chamber dimmed, reflecting his inner turmoil. The voice returned, softer now. "To seek truth is to accept one's own. Only by bearing the weight of your past can you carry the relic's burden." Edwin closed his eyes, letting the guilt, pride, and contradictions wash over him. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of his actions. When he opened his eyes, the figures were gone, and he was back in the chamber. The stone on the altar glowed brighter than ever, its warmth enveloping him. Edwin stepped forward, reaching out. Whatever lay ahead, he felt ready to face it. Edwin's hand hovered over the glowing stone on the altar, his fingers trembling as if the weight of his entire life rested on this moment. The chamber around him hummed with energy, the air thick with anticipation. He closed his eyes, drew a deep breath, and touched the relic. Warmth spread through his body, soothing yet overwhelming, as though every nerve had awakened. Suddenly, the chamber dissolved. Edwin stood in a place beyond comprehension. The sky was an endless expanse of shifting colors, the ground beneath him pulsing like a living being. The air carried whispers, not words, but emotions and memories. They surrounded him, consuming him. "Where am I?" he called out, his voice echoing. "You are within yourself," the familiar voice replied, coming from everywhere and nowhere. "To hold the relic's truths, you must first confront your own." The world shifted. Edwin stood in his childhood home, the scent of his mother's cooking filling the air. At the dining table sat his 10-year-old self, staring at him with wide eyes. "Why did you give up, Edwin?" the boy asked, his voice soft yet piercing. Edwin felt his breath catch. "Give up? I don't know what you mean." "You stopped believing," the boy continued. "In the magic, in the adventure. You let the world convince you it wasn't real. The scene changed. Edwin was in his university office, surrounded by books and artifacts. Across from him sat his mentor, Professor Langley, disappointment etched into his face. Edwin remembered this moment vividly, when he had abandoned research on the Relic of Truths to pursue safer, more accepted studies. "You harbored discovery," Langley said. "You betrayed what made you." The room dissolved into darkness. Memories bombarded Edwin. His first excavation, the betrayal of a friend, the distance between him and his daughter, Helen. Each memory struck like a blow, forcing him to relive his regrets. "Enough!" Edwin shouted, collapsing to his knees. "I know I failed. I know I made mistakes, but I've always tried." Silence followed, and Edwin was left alone in the void. Slowly, the whispers returned, gentler now. "To know truth is to accept imperfection," the voice said. "You are flawed, as all are. But in your willingness to face your flaws, you find worthiness." The ground beneath Edwin solidified, and he was back in the chamber. The stone on the altar now pulsed with a rhythm matching his heartbeat. Edwin reached for it again, and this time its warmth was comforting, inviting. "You have passed the first trial," the voice said. "The relic awaits, but the journey is not yet complete. Truth is not a destination. It is a path." Exhausted but resolute, Edwin stood, clutching the stone. Whatever lay ahead, he knew he had taken the first step toward understanding not just the relic, but himself. The glow of the stone pulsing in Edwin's hand lit the chamber with a hypnotic rhythm. He felt its energy resonating within him, entwined with his very essence. The voice that had guided him through the trial was silent now, leaving only the hum of the chamber. Before him, the altar shifted, stone grinding against stone as a hidden compartment opened. From the shadows emerged a golden orb, its surface etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift under the light. Edwin's breath caught. This was it, the relic of truths. His hands trembled as he reached out. The moment his fingers brushed the orb's surface, a surge of energy coursed through him, and the chamber dissolved. Edwin floated in an expanse of light and darkness, boundaries blurred into infinity. The relic's voice returned, softer now. Truth is not singular. It is a mosaic, a confluence of perspectives and existence itself. Do you seek to see it? "Yes," Edwin whispered. "Show me." The orb's light engulfed him, and images formed. Memories of his life intertwined with visions of events and people unknown. He saw humanity's first spark of curiosity, the rise and fall of civilizations, the struggles and triumphs of countless generations. He felt the invisible threads binding all things. The visions extended beyond humanity. Edwin saw stars being born, galaxies swirling in their eternal dance, and the persistence of life in its many forms. The weight of existence, its beauty and chaos, pressed upon him. Time stretched and collapsed, revealing both the insignificance and grandeur of a single life. Tears streamed down Edwin's face as the relic spoke again. "Truth is infinite and fleeting. To hold it is to bear its burden. Are you prepared?" Edwin hesitated. The enormity of what he had seen overwhelmed him. Could he carry such knowledge? Could he share it, knowing it might disrupt humanity's beliefs? "I don't know if I'm ready," he admitted, his voice trembling. "But I can't turn back now." The relic's light softened, the visions fading. Edwin found himself back in the chamber, the golden orb still in his hands. It felt lighter now, its energy comforting. "You are worthy," the voice said. "But know this, truth is not a gift to be hoarded. It is a responsibility to be shared, but only when the time is right." Edwin nodded, slipping the orb into his satchel. He had found what he came for, but his journey wasn't over. As he emerged from the chamber, the carved stone still in his hand, Edwin felt a profound peace. The mountains seemed to welcome him, their whispers now a song of encouragement. Standing on the threshold of the ruins, Edwin looked out over the sacred valley. The relic's truths swirled in his mind, not as answers but as questions waiting to be explored. Little did he know, the relic's wisdom would soon test him in ways he could never have anticipated. The descent from the hidden chamber was slow, Edwin's body feeling heavier with each step. Though the relic rested in his satchel, its presence was unrelenting, a weight not of mass but of meaning. The whispers of the mountains quieted, as if they too understood the gravity of what had transpired. Amaru waited at the ruin's edge, his expression unreadable. "You have found it," he said, not as a question but a certainty. His eyes fell to the satchel at Edwin's side. "And now, you carry its burden." Edwin nodded, his hand resting over the bag. "I saw everything," he murmured. "The cosmos, humanity, life itself, connections I never imagined, truths too vast to grasp." Amaru studied him. "And now you must decide. The relic is not meant to be hidden, nor wielded recklessly. What will you do with what you've learned?" Edwin hesitated. Could the truths he held uplift humanity, or would they sow chaos? The thought chilled him. As they descended into the sacred valley, the vibrant greens of the jungle and the rushing Urubamba River seemed unchanged, yet profoundly different. He saw them now as threads in a tapestry too immense to comprehend. That evening in Cusco, the lively streets and warm lights offered a sharp contrast to the isolation of the mountains. Yet even among the bustling crowds, Edwin felt alone. Who could he share this with? Who would understand? In his hotel room, Edwin opened his journal. The blank pages felt insurmountable. How could he put into words what he had seen? The relic's truths weren't facts. They were impressions, revelations defying language. He closed the journal with a sigh, his thoughts turning to Helen and Sophie. Amaru visited him the next morning. "You are troubled," he said, sitting across from Edwin in the inn's courtyard. "How could I not be?" Edwin replied. "I thought finding the relic would bring clarity, but it's only brought more uncertainty." Amaru nodded knowingly. The relic shows truths, but does not dictate what to do with them. That choice is yours alone. Knowledge shapes the world not in its possession, but in its use. The weight of those words settled heavily on Edwin. The enormity of the relic's truths made him feel insignificant, yet he understood why it had chosen him, not for his strength, but for his humility. As days passed, Edwin felt the strain of his journey. His illness, forgotten amidst the relic's revelations, returned with a vengeance. Sharp pains and labored breaths reminded him that his time was limited. Whatever he decided, he would have to decide soon. One evening, as the sun set over Cusco, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Edwin sat alone, the relic faintly glowing in his lap. He closed his eyes and listened to the sounds of life around him. Children's laughter, the chatter of vendors, the hum of distant music. For the first time, Edwin didn't feel the need to act or decide. He allowed himself to simply exist. The relic had shown him the vastness of the universe, but also the beauty of fleeting moments. Perhaps that was its greatest truth. Tomorrow he would begin his journey home. But tonight, beneath the stars, he would sit as a man who sought truth and found it, not in answers, but in the questions that remained. The flight home was quiet, the hum of the engines a distant backdrop to Edwin's thoughts. The relic, tucked in his satchel, felt lighter than before, though its presence lingered in his mind. The journey to Machu Picchu had given him what he sought, but the burden of knowing weighed heavily. At the airport, Helen and Sophie greeted him. Sophie ran to him first, her arms wrapping around his waist. "Did you find it, Grandpa? Did you bring me a magic rock?" Edwin smiled, resting a hand on her head. "I found something special, Sophie." Helen approached cautiously, concern etched on her face. "Dad, You look exhausted. You shouldn't have gone alone." "I had to, Helen," he said gently. "This was something I needed to do." The drive home was filled with Sophie's cheerful chatter. Helen remained quiet, glancing at him in the rearview mirror, searching for answers he wasn't ready to share. At home, Edwin retreated to his study. The satchel sat on his desk, its faint glow pulsing with a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. Over the next few days he began to write, not for fame, but for Helen and Sophie. His journal became a testament to what he had seen and felt, a reflection on the connections that bind existence. He avoided mentioning the relic explicitly, knowing its truths were too vast to explain. Instead, he focused on life's beauty and the importance of humility. He also wrote letters. To Helen, he expressed his love and apologized for the times his work had overshadowed their relationship. To Sophie, he described the wonders of the world, urging her to seek her own adventures and hold on to her curiosity. As days turned to weeks, Edwin's health declined rapidly. The pain was constant, but he bore it with quiet acceptance. He had made peace with the inevitable. One evening, as the sun set, Edwin called Helen and Sophie to his study. He handed them the journal and letters, his hands trembling slightly. "What's this, Dad?" Helen asked, her voice thick with emotion. "A gift," he said softly. "For both of you." Sophie opened her letter, her eyes lighting up. "You're the best, Grandpa," she whispered, hugging him. Helen held the journal close, tears streaming down her face. "You've always been my hero, Dad." "And you've always been my light, Helen," he replied. That night, Edwin lay in bed with the relic on his bedside table. He closed his eyes, letting out a long, contented sigh. The weight of the journey and the truths he carried seemed to fade, leaving only peace. When Helen checked on him the next morning, she found him still and serene, a gentle smile on his face. The relic beside him no longer glowed. It had become a simple, unassuming orb, its purpose fulfilled. Helen and Sophie spent the day reading his journal, their grief softened by the wisdom and love he had left behind. In his writings they found not just a chronicle of his journey, but a reminder of life's beauty and interconnectedness. The relic, now silent, remained on his desk, a symbol of the truths Edwin had uncovered and the legacy he left behind. Weeks passed since Edwin's quiet departure, yet his presence lingered in the home he shared with Helen and Sophie. The relic, now a dull orb, rested on his desk, a silent reminder of his journey. Helen often found herself drawn to it, its stillness strangely comforting, though its secrets remained beyond her reach. Edwin's journal became a source of solace for Helen. She read it slowly, savoring his reflections. What moved her most were not grand revelations, but simple reminders of life's interconnectedness and the courage to embrace uncertainty. One evening, Sophie wandered into the study clutching her letter. "Mom, Grandpa said I should look for magic. Do you think it's real?" Helen smiled, pulling Sophie onto her lap. "Magic isn't just about what's impossible. It's in the little things, like how the stars shine or how people love each other even when far apart." Sophie's gaze drifted to the relic. "Do you think it's still magic?" Helen hesitated. Maybe its magic is in what it taught him, and what he's teaching us. The next day, Helen took the relic to a museum. She asked for it to be displayed quietly, as a tribute to Edwin's work and the curiosity that had defined his life. Back home, she began organizing his notes and letters, realizing his true legacy wasn't in the relic or discoveries, but in his way of living, with wonder, humility, and a deep appreciation for the unknown. Months later, Sophie stood before her class at Show and Tell, holding a garden rock. "My grandpa said everything is connected, like threads in a web," she explained proudly. "This rock might not look like much, but it's part of something huge." Her teacher smiled. "That's a wonderful way to see the world, Sophie." As Sophie grew, her questions mirrored Edwin's, and Helen nurtured her curiosity. knowing Edwin's legacy lived on through her. Years later, Helen stood in the museum, now featuring a wing on unsolved mysteries. At its center sat the Relic, surrounded by Edwin's journal and artifacts. A plaque read, "Edwin Grayson, a seeker of truths who reminded us the greatest mysteries lie within." Helen felt pride and gratitude. She glanced at Sophie, now a young woman with her grandfather's fire in her eyes. "What would he say about this?" Helen asked. Sophie smiled. "He'd say it's not about the relic. It's about what it showed us." Helen nodded, tears in her eyes. "He'd be proud of you." That night under the stars, Sophie traced constellations. "Do you think Grandpa's still out there?" Helen smiled. "In a way, he'll always be here, in the questions we ask and the answers we find." As the stars sparkled, Helen knew Edwin's search for truth had led to life's greatest discovery, that magic lies not in certainty, but in infinite possibilities. And in that moment, she understood his legacy wasn't just the relic or journal, but the hearts he had touched,